What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at Saturday night UFC Fight Night. Cyril Gane taking on Tai Tuivasa in Paris. As always, guys, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the fight night. What was your favorite fight and favorite moment? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And leave a like on the video, it's greatly appreciated. Let's get straight into things and kick off with the main event. Cyril Gane defeats Tai Tuivasa by KO in the third round. A super, sort of heavyweight fight. I think the sort of crowd and everything around this fight was brilliant. Finally, the UFC getting into France. I think it was a great moment for them, and I think this fight kind of proved what sort of market the French one can be for the UFC in future. Obviously, I think as the years have gone by, not only have European fighters started to up their game, but you're starting to see more and more French fighters come into the game. Kind of started all the way back with Czech Congo, back when I started watching it. But now, you're looking at someone in Cyril Gane, he's an absolute monster. One of my biggest takeaways from the fight was the moment the crowd started singing the French national anthem. It was one of those moments. It was insane because the atmosphere was just so crazy in there. And I think both fighters kind of took a moment to kind of sink it all in, and they kind of acknowledged it to each other, how crazy it was. But in terms of the fight, it was a really interesting matchup going in. I wasn't able to do my picks for this fight. I kind of ran out of time, so I didn't bother putting them up. But I think Cyril Gane was, a pretty decent favorite going in. But Tai Tuivasa gave it everything he could. I thought it might be interesting in the fight whether Tai might even look to use some sort of wrestling, because we know he's been working on it for so long, and I think in his previous fights he's kind of proven how many levels he's kind of gone up in that department. But he didn't. He looked to stay on the feet, and I think Cyril Gane made it extremely difficult for him. I think his movement was so much quicker than anything Tai has ever seen before, and his ability to fire out the jab, which it might be the best jab in all of MMA at this moment in time, but it's definitely up there. An absolute piston of a jab from Cyril Gane. But Tai Tuivasa, I think as the fight was going on, he started to get a little bit more, I guess you could say, just letting everything go. He was getting a bit frustrated, and, with the movement of Cyril Gane, he really wasn't able to track him down. But I think it might have been in the second round, he was actually able to drop Gane, or it might have been the third even. He was able to drop Gane with a big right hand and sat him down to the canvas with his back against the fence. And I was kind of like, fuck, is this it? Has he done it? Because it would have been a huge upset. And I think from what Tai kind of went through earlier on in his UFC career, when he was picking up losses against guys who, if they were to be matched up now, you'd fully expect him to beat. There's some disappointing moments for him, but now he's kind of upped his game. And, if he could have beat someone like Cyril Gane, it would have been a massive step forward in his career. But it wasn't to be. Gane recovered pretty quick, and I think that's kind of towards his condition and how much of a great athlete and what sort of shape he's in at heavyweight. He recovered really well, and he started going to the body of Tai Tuivasa, and he's able to hurt him with a really good deep. I'm not sure what sort of area of the body it landed on Tai Tuivasa, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhere around the liver, because the way he was kind of hunched over and in agony, you could tell it was some serious problems with Tai, and he kept going to that body until it finally opened up the head for him, and he ended up KOing Tai in a quite vicious fashion. For me though, I think this highlighted what makes Gane so special in the fight. He's not the flashiest of guys in terms of he's not going to be throwing spinning back kicks and stuff like that, but what he does is the fundamentals, and he does it extremely well. Like I mentioned before, his jab is one of my favorites to watch in the UFC. There aren't many people who have that sort of whip behind their jab and, have a meaningful jab like he does. I like the way he uses his jab as well. He kind of uses the up jab as well at times, which is really impressive, the way he uses that. And with his kicking game, he's able to go to the legs a lot, but it's stuff like his teep which makes him so kind of hard to get in on, because he's got an extremely good reach at the heavyweight division at 81 inches, and when he's using that teep, it's hard for people to kind of find range on him, and I think Tai really suffered from that in this fight. I think for Cyril, this was a massive win. I think this was his first fight back since the Francis Ngannou loss, which was an interesting one because I think he was a huge favourite going into that fight. And I think if they was to run it back, you know, I could see multiple different ways the fight could play out. So if he can eventually get that rematch, you know, I think it'd be great for him. You know, Tai Tuivasa was a really good opponent to come back to. It wasn't really a gimme fight. Obviously, tough as they come, extremely powerful as well, and very athletic considering, you know, the way he looks. He's not like Gane, carved of stone, but he's just got that ability to kind of spring out of nowhere and finish the fight, which he almost showed in the fight. I think for Tai, this is a bit of a setback, but I don't think it's too crazy. I think the fact that he got knocked out was kind of bad. You know, for him, a guy rarely, you know, shows signs of being hurt. Is a big one. Is he going to be, you know, how is he going to come back? Was his recovery going to be like? These are questions which will be asked in his next matchup, but I think you'll see him in a fairly decent sort of matchup coming back, and I wouldn't expect it to be too long. I know Robert Whittaker was talking about some potential Sydney card. I could see him getting on that card. I think a good fight for him would be Dorcas. I think that would be an extremely fun matchup. You know, two of the younger guys in the division squaring off against each other. I think Dorcas does offer some of the things that, you know, Tai struggled with against Cyril in terms of the hand speed and the movement. So it'd be interesting to see if he can learn lessons from this Gane fight and take those into his next fight. For Cyril, I'm really not sure what's going to be next for him. I guess he's waiting on some sort of title fight, but I'm not sure if they'll give him that straight away. It's kind of disappointing that Tom Aspinall fight against Curtis Blades went the way it did because we didn't have a clear winner in that fight. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did Cyril Gane versus Curtis Blades in what would be a really fun matchup. I think the fact that Gane has that sort of speed and movement to keep out of the range would give Curtis a lot of problems. But, you know, I think Curtis has shown over the years that he's becoming even better in the stand-up, and his wrestling is as elite as it comes in the heavyweight division. So that's one I'd be really interested to see in the future. So hopefully we can get something like that done. You know, a tremendous victory on Cyril Gane's part in this fight, though, and, you know, what an amazing sort of moment for him to be the headliner on the first ever French card. And I hope the UFC goes back there because, you know, the fans kind of proved their sort of worth. You know, the atmosphere was crazy. I know they did a Bellator card there, and I guess you could say it wasn't as good. I think it was Ryan Bader against, maybe, was it Czech Congo, maybe? It was a boring fight anyway in the main event. But we'll move on to the co-main. Robert Whittaker defeats Marvin Vettori by unanimous decision. I'm not kind of surprised with the way this fight played out. I think if you kind of could picture it going in, this is probably one of the more likely outcomes. They were talking about the defensive wrestling of Robert Whittaker and just how good it is. He is insane at that part of his game. I mean, they were talking about the Yoel Romero fight, and I think what makes him so special is not only is his takedown defense so good, it's his ability to scramble back up to the feet after that. Never kind of, you know, allowing himself to be flat on his back. You know, an incredible sort of part of his game. Vettori was never really quite able to get him into that sort of position though. I think Vettori had moments where he was able to, you know, control Whittaker against the fence, but he wasn't really able to do anything with it. I think where this fight kind of played out, majority-wise, was on the feet, and it was with Robert Whittaker kind of dictating the pace of the fight. You know, Vettori would come forward at times, but he was never really able to pin down Whittaker, and Whittaker was able to fire shots at will. I think this was a huge win for Robert, but kind of highlights one of my problems with MMA. You know, great win for Robert Whittaker. He, you know, stays as the number one contender, I guess you could say. Vettori is a hard defeat for him, but I think he's proven that he is one of the top guys in the division, and I don't know what's next for him in the division in terms of matchups, but I think you look at his previous performances and you can say that he's going to get someone around the top 5, and that's well deserved. But for Robert, it's a hard one, right? Because he's lost Izzy twice. He's not really deserving of a rematch in terms of he's only beat one guy since losing the last fight. But this is my problem with MMA. You look at the weight class middleweight, it's 15 pounds up, 15 pounds down. No, it's not even 15 pounds up, is it? 185. Well, anyway, 185 to 205 is it's a crazy jump. You know, Robert's never going to be a light heavyweight, either way you look at it. And the fact that he'd have to drop 15 to get down to 170 again, I don't think he could even do it. But this is why there needs to be more divisions, because someone as good as Robert Whittaker cannot just be someone who's going to be in that number one position and not get that title fight. You know, if the divisions were more closely, I think every 5 pounds, you know, he'd be able to jump up and down, you know, and there would be more sort of matchups for him, and they'd be able to use the star power that he has, because Robert Whittaker is a star. You know, he was one of the first sort of Australian guys to really get to that elite level and put in the performances that he did. But now I guess he's going to have to wait around. He says he doesn't want to fight till after Christmas anyway, and he kind of wants to go on that Sydney card. Whether they do Cannoneer too, I'm not sure. It's hard though. I wish there were more weight classes in MMA, and I know there's arguments against it and for it, but I think the arguments for outweigh the arguments against. I mean, yes, the talent would be diluted, but it would create more opportunities for more stars to come through in MMA, and I just like to see it personally myself. I think middleweight is in the middle of, you know, it's hard because not many guys are, you know, at 185 and are able to jump down to 170, and not many of them are able to jump up to 205 with much success. But it's going to be interesting to see where Robert goes in his career, and if he can get back to the title fight. I think the last fight against Izzy was a lot closer than, you know, some of the other people's performances against him. You look at Vettori and what he's done against Adesanya, and it hasn't been all too impressive. But we'll have to wait and see. I think both guys are going to have tough fights coming up in the future, and hopefully that, you know, Robert can headline the Australian card, get Ty on there as well, and there'll be some fun matchups for sure. We'll move on to Imavov. I always struggle to pronounce this guy's name, against Joaquin Buckley. This fight was super fun. Imanov, the winner by decision in the end. I was kind of a bit pissed off with the scorecards. I agreed with 29-28. I think two of them had it 29-28, but one of them gave Imavov the final round, and I think that kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. Buckley clearly won round 3, unless I am mistaken. But I guess for me, it was a fight where Buckley wasn't able to get off until it was too late. I think Imavov did a great job of applying the pressure on Buckley and kind of getting in his face. And, you know, Buckley was struggling with the reach. And, you know, at 5'10", I think they say he is. He didn't look like a 5'10" guy going against 6'3". I do believe that some of the heights and that aren't correct in the UFC. I wouldn't be surprised if Buckley was 5'8", 5'9". But he struggled to get in on Imavov. I think Imavov did a great job of controlling the range, and he was able to get Buckley to the ground and kind of control him at times as well, and it was super impressive. But you know, Buckley came out with a firecracker lit up his ass in the third round, and you know, I think Imavov looked like he faded quite a bit in that third round, and Buckley had his most success there. But it was a very impressive win on Imavov's part. You know, holding on to that number 12 in the division. I'm not sure how he stacks up against the guys higher up in the division. I think he's got a great physique for the middleweight division at 6'3", gives him a lot of advantages, but I think he'd struggle against the likes of Hermansson and, you know, that sort of caliber of fighter. Not necessarily the elite of the division, but the next step up for him. But I'm sure that's what we're going to probably get next. I just don't know where I see him fitting in. Buckley, on the other hand, I think he's got to do a bit of a better job getting into range. I think he was firing a lot to get into range, rather than feinting and working his way in slowly. I think at times as well in the third round, kind of following him evolve instead of cutting off the octagon, as you see the elite level fighters do. you know, he's got crazy power and explosiveness, but I think it's going to take him a little bit more time to really put his whole game together. But I've been impressed with his run in the UFC. I think he's had some disappointing performances, but he's had some really crazy sort of high moments, which have kind of given him this sort of star in the UFC power, which, you know, normally a guy in his position in a division wouldn't have. But I guess for me, I think it's only a matter of time before he starts getting better and better, putting stuff together. But for now, you know, I think he's going to struggle to get into the, you know, sort of top 10 area of the middleweight division. But I think if he could put everything together, he could have a lot of success. I don't think that his frame is necessarily, you know, too small for the middleweight division. I think, you know, you've seen guys similar in stature have success in the past, and I believe Buckley can as well. And I'm excited to see what sort of improvements he can make going into the future, because, I mean, in his previous fight, he was using a lot of wrestling and he was very impressive in that department. But this one kind of struggled to get a read on Imavov, in my opinion. For Imavov, like I said, you know, it's got to be someone in the top 10 now. And I think that's going to be a tough matchup. I'm not sure what the middleweight rankings are looking like off the top of my head. But I'm sure we're going to get something fun. I wouldn't even mind a Paulo Costa fight. Obviously, Paulo coming off a big win against Luke Rockhold. I'm not sure if the UFC trusts him enough yet to give him a big sort of highly ranked guy. But I think Imavov versus Costa would be a sort of perfect fight for them to make, in terms of, if Imavov wins, it gives him a lot more sort of star power. I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for, but, you know, and for Paulo Costa, it doesn't move him too high up the rankings and give him too much hype. But that's a fight I'd like to see. I think that'd be an interesting one. Roman Kopylov. That knockout was nuts. I think he set up to the body with the body kicks, which were really nice, and he kind of started teeing off from the head, and then all of a sudden you saw Alessio's hands drop, and then it was good night. I don't have too much to say on this fight, other than I think it was an impressive finish, the way he was able to put his strikes together in the end, but that is what it is. I think William Gomez put together a good fight. I think he proved that he was well-rounded against Jarno Errens, I think it is. I think he was good in terms of his kicking. You know, he's got some very powerful kicks. I would have liked to have seen him set them up a bit better. I think sometimes he was throwing blind. You could see him looking to, you know, put the left hand out there before throwing a left high kick, which kind of similar to what Leon Edwards did the other week. But I think what was impressive by him, it was his ability to kind of control the fights in moments where, you know, it wasn't necessarily going his way. You know, he was having success in the striking, but then you'd see Jarno sort of put on the pressure. But William was able to find a takedown and find some control on with some top control on the bottom. I think it was an impressive fight for him. I don't know too much about him. I think he's fought in the UFC one time before this, if I'm not mistaken. But I think it was an impressive win. For you know, a French guy in his backyard. You know, it was amazing for the crowd. And, you know, if they do another French card, I'm sure he'll be on it. And I think this guy's got something, but I'm not too sure. But my fight of the night, it was the fight I was most looking forward to. Coming in, I wasn't able to do my picks, but I was going to struggle on this one hard. Two of my favourites, Charles Jourdain, just one of these guys who goes in there and I think fights for the win, but it's not really about winning and losing for him. It's about putting on a show. And Nathaniel Woods, coming out of the UK, has been one of my favourites for a long time. I think he's one of these guys who is technically, especially in the stand-up, a very, very high-level fighter. And, you know, I think at 135, you saw him not necessarily struggle, but the Casey Kenny fight was a disappointing one on his part. And I think the one which was probably most hurtful was the John Dodson fight. You know, it was a fight in which, you know, it was a big step up in class for him, and Dodson was able to catch him. But what I really enjoyed about this fight was both guys' ability to kind of, you know, fight at all sort of levels of the stand-up in every range. You know, I think Nathaniel was getting the better, certainly on the inside and on the outside with his kicks. I think the leg kick game of Nathaniel is he's probably one of the strongest leg kickers in the featherweight division, not in terms of power, but in terms of the way he's able to set them up and use them to, I guess you could say, set up his opponents for other techniques. I mean, there's a lot of great leg kickers at 145. Off the top of my head, you look at Barboza. But I do put him up there in terms of his ability to use the leg kicks to set up other things. But what I really loved in this fight was Nathaniel's ability on the inside. You know, it wasn't necessarily in the clinch, but they'd be basically head to head, similar to what you see in a boxing fight. And his ability to pick his shots, not necessarily throw everything with power, but he was picking, you know, 3 and 4 shots at a time, and it was looking really good to the judges. I think Nathaniel showed a really strong area of his game in this fight as well, where it came to the sweeps from the clinch. I think he gave Jourdain problems with that. Jourdain is someone who is very underrated on the ground. He's got some, you know, fantastic submissions, and I was kind of worried a little bit for Nathaniel at times, but I think he did a great job of just controlling from the top, not looking to do anything too flashy or fancy, but just to get the win. And I think it was a really fun fight. I think both guys had their moments. I think Nathaniel Wood definitely had the more, I guess you could say, show-stopping moments in terms of some of the shots he was landing on. Jourdain definitely wobbled him. I think he did a great job of never rushing and going in and, you know, just leaving himself open to get caught, because Jourdain is someone who's very explosive and can find you from basically anywhere. I think Wood did a great job of putting everything together, and which was a very impressive victory. That's 2 now at featherweight. I think the last one was, what's the guy's name? Charles Rosa, which was an impressive win last time out. But this one, I think it was a big step up in competition. Jourdain, definitely someone who I think could be a ranked fighter very easily. It's just sometimes I think he's probably got to be a bit more strict in his style, not as loose, but I think that's what makes him special as well. For Wood, I'd love to see him get a ranked opponent next. He's definitely one of my favourite fighters in the division, and one of my favourite fighters from the UK. I think this guy, you know, he's had a few setbacks in his career, but if it wasn't for them, he could be somewhere in a similar position to Leon Edwards, where he's beaten a lot of guys and, you know, he's on his way to a title fight. I do think he's very special. I think his stand-up is extremely good, and he's so high level, and I think it's his fight IQ which makes him someone so special. I cannot wait to see what happens with both these guys in the future. 2 of my favourite fighters at featherweight, and I think they both have very, very bright futures. That's it for this video though, guys. I just did a main card. I haven't even been able to watch the prelims yet. Hopefully I can get round to doing that. I do have 2 videos coming out tomorrow. One is going to be my picks for UFC 279, Nate Diaz taking on Khamzat Chimaev, but a really fun card underneath that as well. And I'm also going to be giving you my fight prediction for Savannah Marshall taking on Clarissa Shields, which is a huge fight on the women's side of boxing. Hopefully you'll join me then for those videos. Hopefully you have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you tomorrow. As always, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow's latest. Peace.